This is how you turn this simple coffee area into the ultimate coffee station. All right, so we're gonna make a coffee station for your house, right? You need an area to kind of organize the coffee, the mugs, all that stuff. So we went ahead and bought a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood, and we have a general idea of what we're gonna do here. We have a nice fancy blueprint right here. So we said 36-36, right? That gives us a foot and a foot on this one. 36-36, let me get a tape measure. Probably need a tape measure.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. It's not so important that the cut is exact to what we want. Okay. It's more important that these two cuts are the same size, because they're going to be two sides of the cabinet. We say 12 or 11.
For what?
Let me grab some glasses.
Some what?
Glasses.
Oh, do I need glasses?
You're wearing glasses. Cut the next one. Doesn't have to be exact because it's not mine.
Right, exactly. Oh man,
let me see. Let me see your eyes. It's the cost of safety.
Yeah.
So these are the sides.
Okay.
Right? So we need to decide. So we have this guy. Now we need to assemble it. We drilled some pocket holes into the bottom piece. Right there. But when we assemble it like this, we want to elevate it slightly because we're going to put a piece of molding at the bottom. Now we can use these as spacers from the bottom when we put this together. So it's not, we're not trying to hold it and screw it together.
I see what you're saying.
We're going to use these as the spacer blocks. All right, here's what we have going on. We have the very bottom of the cabinet flipped upside down on the sawhorses just to help stabilize it, with the pocket holes facing up. And then we went ahead and took those spacers and just clamped them in place on the side panels, just to allow us to have a little bit of a lip to rest it on the edge here. So once we have this lined up and we have a bead of glue in here, we can use these corner clamps to go ahead and clamp it together, and then we can drive in the pocket holes from this end here. All right, before I go ahead and glue on this next panel, I'm gonna use this bottom panel here as a reference point for the top runner. So I'm gonna just line up this strip at the very edge there. That looks good. And then I'm just gonna mark down below. There we go. Now we need two of these, so I'm gonna just use this one as the reference piece. Let's see. Good there, good there. Okay, good. So while that is drying for now, I'm gonna go ahead and just drill out the pocket holes for this so we can connect it.
Okay.
All right, so everything is glued together. Good. Put it down here. Good. All right. So that's
okay. No wobble.
So we're attaching these runner boards to the top of the cabinet. I'm just adding some glue on the edge here, so that way when I drive it in place, it'll dry and stabilize this. Now we just need to add the other backing piece here. It should be okay, I hope. So the main cabinet's done for now, and we're gonna work on the hutch portion of it. So we have the two side pieces of the hutch right here, and we just need the top of it and the shelf that's gonna go in the middle. So we have this piece here that's the same width as those. We went ahead and just measured out the same width as the cabinet because the hutch is gonna sit right on top. And we're gonna cut that down right now. We have majority of the hutch assembled here, so we have the two side pieces and the top. It was just basic pocket holes on the side. It's nice and glued together. It's pretty strong. We're just gonna add the bottom shelf right here. In order to make sure it's going in straight, I just put my carpenter square here, clamped it in place right where we want it for the shelf to end up. I'm gonna go ahead and put a bead of glue on both sides, spread it out. We'll slide the shelf in place and then drive the screws in, and we'll have to work just relatively quick so the glue doesn't dry, obviously. All right, so it's day 2 now. We have the hutch and the main cabinet done. The hutch is still a little wobbly, as well as the cabinet. It's a little more solid, so we went ahead and bought some more of this backing board, and we're just gonna reinforce each piece here. So hopefully that'll help out, but I think it'll be okay. We've gone ahead and reinforced the hutch and the cabinet itself. You had this like extra piece of granite at home, right? So we're gonna use this for the countertop. I think it looks really nice. It kind of just ties the project together too. But the cabinet's good. Right now we're gonna cut a piece of wood for this divider. We're gonna divide the cabinet into 2 pieces. And you said what, you want like a drawer here maybe? Cabinet under, and then a double door here for the main cabinet. All right, we've gone ahead and cut out our divider and pocket holed it, screwed it in place. So this is nice and solid. We're gonna go ahead now and get the trim pieces and just trim out the cabinet so we have a general idea of where everything lays, and then we can go ahead and put the shelves in, as well as the doors and everything. We cut out the first trim piece right here. I've mitered the edges so that we can get a better fit. And I'm gonna line it up at the very top here. I'm gonna purposefully leave the trim a little proud on each end here. That way I can come back with the flush cut router bit and get this nice and smooth along this edge here. But for now, I'm gonna let it hang off the edge just a little bit. The glue's gonna do most of the holding here.
Yeah.
This is just hold it in place by the time the glue dries, and then we're gonna fill in those holes too. All right, now that we've finished trimming out the entire cabinet and the hutch, I'm just filling in all the holes from the brad nails. A little trick to fill in the holes is just a little bit of wood glue on every hole here, and then I'm just taking some very fine sawdust that I have from my sander, and I'm gonna just push it into the glue here. So that should fill in the hole. It's a different color than the original wood, but because this is getting painted, it doesn't really matter, just so we can fill that up. Once this all dries, we'll go ahead and sand it down and make it nice and flat. We've gone ahead and filled in all the holes. As you can see, we have quite a few throughout the cabinet. We're gonna let this dry till tomorrow, just so we give it the best chance to harden and seal up all these holes. In the meantime, we're gonna stand this cabinet up, put the countertop back on it, and just see how it looks as of right now.
Okay.
There we go. Nice.
Look at that.
It's actually coming along.
It does look actually pretty good.
It looks much nicer.
Sorry.
So the wood glue has gone ahead and dried, so we're gonna sand that down. A little bit of change of plan on the cabinet here. We're no longer using that marble top, so we are going to have to make a wooden countertop for this, but we'll leave that for now. Let's go ahead and sand all these nubs down and see how that looks. That's what I'm looking for there. We've sanded these down and they're nice and smooth now. We're going to focus on the cabinet doors. We want all the cabinets to be roughly the same width. And when we measured this out, I think this was around 22 and a half. So if we do 11 and a quarter for each door, they'll be all the same width. And same thing with the hutch. This is a 1/2 inch sheet of plywood, and we're gonna use this for the doors. So we went ahead and measured about 11 and a quarter right here, and we're just gonna rip this down, and then we can use the miter saw to just cut this down to the proper length. Okay, we have all the doors now cut, non-mounted. Not mounted. This one I'm not gonna cut down just yet because we're going to put a drawer at the very top and then have a cabinet below. So I'm going to leave this a little long so we can cut that down to size once we know the dimensions of the drawer. We have all the pieces of the drawer all cut out here. So we have the two sides and the front and back. We just need to figure out the bottom piece here. Normally what you do is if you have a table saw, you cut out a little channel here for the bottom piece to just slide right in. Unfortunately, I don't have a table saw, so I'm just going to use a router. So I have a 1/4 inch bit on here. I'll clamp a fence onto the side here and just run a channel across each piece, and that should allow us to slide in the bottom nice and easily. The drawer is in place. Unfortunately, it wasn't perfectly square, but I've gone ahead and just corner clamped these two corners, and hopefully that'll pull it nice and square before the glue dries. So we're gonna leave that till tomorrow and see how that turns out. For right now, we still have this lip on the very edge of the trim here, about 1/8 of an inch or so. I'm gonna hit it with the router and just get this nice and flush. So it's day whatever at this point, I've lost track. First thing we're gonna do is seal up the edges of the doors. So luckily, because we're painting all these doors, we don't actually have to put a veneer strip or trim these out or anything. A little trick to kind of seal these so that once there's a layer of paint on there, they look nice and smooth, is I'm gonna take a little bit of drywall spackle and just put it on the edge right here. So obviously I'll do a better job than that. But once this is on here and dried, and you give it just a nice light sanding, that'll smoothen out this edge so that once paint goes on, you won't be able to even see it. So we're gonna just go ahead and do this for now. Now that we've gone ahead and put the drywall spackle around all the edges of the cabinets, we'll let that dry. While that's drying, we're going to figure out the countertop itself. Since we're not using the marble anymore, we're gonna have to make our own here. So we have this sheet of plywood that will sit perfectly on top of the cabinet, and we're going to have to trim it out just to hide this edge here. So we're going to use some, what is this, 1x2 material. We're gonna drill some pocket holes at the very bottom of this. We'll butt up the trim piece, make sure there's a bead of glue on it, screw it together, and then of course miter the edges to make it look nice. Once we get some, once we sand this down and get it nice and smooth, this should look pretty good. Not bad, not bad. The only part, because this is pretty, like, look at that. That's good there, that's okay there. Wow, that can get sanded down. Yeah, that feels very good there. This I'm gonna redo. This is pretty off here. All right, let's go ahead and secure this in place, and then we'll get the next one and be done with the top. With the countertop done and trimmed out, we have it in place on top of the cabinet, and the hutch is installed. We still want to add a shelf just here in the very center, just to add additional storage above the coffee maker and all that other stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and frame that out, put a shelf in here, and that way you can have additional storage. Now that I have the shelf installed here and it's screwed in and in place, I'm gonna take the hutch down and just give everything a nice light sanding. Again, the base of the cabinet and the hutch are going to be painted rather, so they don't have to be sanded down too much, just enough to smooth everything out. The top is going to take some time because the top is going to stay its natural color with a coat of polyurethane or lacquer or something. So I'm going to have to sand this down very, very well. But for now, let me just sand down the cabinet and the hutch, and it should be ready for paint. Unfortunately, the drawer, we weren't able to pull it square, so it's not perfect. We're going to have to remake it. We do have this 3/4 inch material, so hopefully once this is all said and done, this will help keep everything nice and square, just because it's a thicker material. It'll be a thicker face for this to sit on, so should be a little better for it to, you know. Yeah, you know. Okay, now that the main cabinet's pretty much done and finished, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a coat of paint. I'm going to use this Rust-Oleum turbo spray system. I've never actually used this before, but it's supposed to give a nice wide spray pattern. That way it'll come out nice and even across the entire thing. So let's go ahead and give that a shot and see how it turns out. Okay, that's pretty awesome. That coats quite a bit at once, so that's pretty good. Although the turbo spray system was pretty great, I mean, it covered a good amount of the cabinet, it wasn't enough, and I ran through this can pretty fast. I can't justify buying another one to continue covering this. I'd probably even need 2 more. So I have some flat white paint already from a previous project, so I'm just gonna roll it on because I can cover a lot more that way. It'll take a little bit more time, but you know what, it's cheaper in the end, so That's what I really care about at this point. Now that I have the first layer painted, it really helps to highlight all the little imperfections that I may have to go over and fill in just so they're not visible. So for example, between every sheet of plywood, there's this little seam. It doesn't look very good once it's painted like this, so I want to go ahead and just fill that in. Instead of using wood filler or putty, I'm just going to use some drywall spackle. Again, because this is getting painted, especially white, using drywall spackle will be easier, so it dries a lot faster. It can smooth it out a little easier. Now, once this is dry, I'll give it a slight bit of sanding just to smoothen it out, and then give it a couple more layers of paint, and it should be good to go. Next thing I'm gonna do is attach this backing board to the cabinet. Normally I would do this before I painted anything. However, Home Depot didn't have this in stock, and I checked this morning, and luckily they did. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And then any imperfections that may come from attaching it now, I'll just paint over that. So just like before, I'm going to attach this and leave a little bit proud on each end. That way I can come back with my flush cut router bit and just trim all the edges down to get this nice and flush. Now that we have the cabinet painted, we want to add in some shelves. I don't want the shelves to just be stationary in here. You want them to be adjustable, right? So in case you want to add more or change their height, I went ahead and bought this Craig shelf pin jig. And the way it works is we just line it up to the side here, and it gives us evenly spaced holes to drill out all the little holes for these tiny shelf pins. I'm going to just use a little spacer block. I'll put that right there in the corner, line this guy up right here. And if I hold everything securely, I should be able to just drill all these out. And if I take this away, we should have holes all evenly spaced out. And this should take a shelf pin, just like that. Good. We've finished putting all the door handles and doors onto the cabinet. It's looking pretty good so far. Next up, we're going to go ahead and attach the countertop itself. So we'll go ahead and grab it on here, line everything up, make sure it's nice and square. And then what we'll do is just drive in some screws from the very bottom, put in about 4 screws on each runner, and that should secure it in place. After that, I'll just run a bead of caulking underneath the countertop. That way it'll seal up all the edges and just make everything look nice and neat. Now that we have these doors and the hardware installed, we're gonna add another door to this middle cabinet that's gonna open up towards the top. We got this specialty hardware from Home Depot. These are spring-loaded latches, or spring-loaded hinges rather. In order to mount this, we added tiny little spacer blocks at the very bottom here. So we'll just go ahead and mount these in like this. And then when they're in the open position, these should hold pretty nicely and keep everything open until you want to close it. Now with the door finally installed, the cabinet is now finished, and it's time to move it into place. Once the cabinet was in position, we went ahead and put the hutch on top of it and secured it in place with some metal brackets. With the final screw finally in place, the cabinet is now finished. I'm very happy with how the cabinet turned out and how it looks here in its corner, and of course, we can't forget about all that extra storage. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, leave any comments down below on ways I can improve this build, and make sure you subscribe to stay tuned for any future projects. Thank you for watching.